point of view because it showed the political nature again of this. And some theorize that Trump was furious that Assange wouldn't try to clear him from the Russiagate burden that he was under, and that's one reason he wanted him indicted and arrested. And in fact, as I said, Cassandra Fairbanks testified that Trump ordered this arrest. This point of view, wanted to thank because it showed the political nature again of this. And some theorize that what's going on? Trump was furious that Assange wouldn't try to clear him from the Russiagate burden that he was under. And sorry about that. Our live stream started. I just wanted to thank Marjorie for what and Dan for what they said about our coverage. We were one of the few media outlets who were able to get access to the courtroom remotely. We saw every minute on the screen. And there was one other thing about the title of the book I missed, which was Inside WikiLeaks, the Guardian's book. That's all I wanted to add. Oh, and one other thing about the fact, how can an Australian journalist working outside the United States be indicted by the Espionage Act because of a 1961 amendment to the Espionage Act that allowed universal jurisdiction? Before 61, Assange could not have been charged under this. And that came out of a case of an American diplomat in the embassy in Warsaw who was caught in bed with another woman, and the Polish security services got a photograph. They blackmailed him to get classified documents. He took him out of the embassy and no longer on U.S. territory, went up to Polish territory. Some congressman got crazy about that and had this amendment put in. That's how Assange could be charged.
Well, thank you, Joe. You've actually answered a couple of questions that have been asked. Does anyone else, Marjorie or Daniel, have something you'd like to add or exchange that others have said?
I see one question here. Questions, has the Espionage Act been challenged in the Supreme Court? Good question. The answer is no. The one person who brought this up to the Supreme Court, Morrison, who was the second person after me to be charged with this about 10 years after my case, brought it up to the Supreme Court, but they denied hearing it certiorari. So it has never been addressed in the Supreme Court to this day, actually, with the constitutional issues of this. If we go back 49 years, the chances, the legal basis of it, the chances for my conviction being overturned, that is the Espionage Act being overturned on constitutional grounds, were quite good at that point. That can't be said today. There's been enough changes we've seen in the Supreme Court even before Trump. So we can't at all be confident that the current five majority justices will notice that there are extreme constitutional violations going on here. But in any case, they haven't ever yet addressed it.
Right. We're going to get into the questions in just a couple of minutes. Is there anything else that you three would like to say regarding something that Marjorie? Yes.
Yeah. In 1919, there was a prosecution that went all the way to the Supreme Court, Schenck v. U.S. Schenck was a socialist. He was an official in the National Socialist Party. He was an anti-war activist. And he was charged under the Espionage Act and convicted. And the Supreme Court upheld his conviction against a First Amendment challenge, saying that by distributing flyers and circulars against the draft, he created a clear and present danger to the United States. And therefore, the First Amendment didn't stop his prosecution under the Espionage Act. And about the same time, another socialist, Eugene Debs, was tried and convicted under the Espionage Act. His conviction went all the way to the Supreme Court. He gave an anti-war speech, and his conviction was also affirmed by the Supreme Court.
Wow. Okay. If you don't have any more to say to each other, let's open up to the questions. I think I'll take the opportunity to select some. We have 22 questions, and Ann Batista, maybe I'm not pronouncing your last name very well, but she's asked several questions. I'll pick a couple, and I think one should go to Joe. She's asked about Vault 7, and she says something about you perhaps did not say that Assange, or rather the Democratic National Committee's emails were leaked rather than hacked.
She's talking about the DN, not Vault 7, but the DNC and Podesta emails.
Yeah, she also mentioned Vault 7. I don't know if you could take both those questions.
Okay, well, I'm not sure what you're talking about. The DNC emails and the Podesta emails. Well, the DNC hired a company called CrowdStrike to examine their servers, and they came up with statements that Russia had hacked them. But in closed-door testimony that only became revealed this year with Sean Henry, who was the president of CrowdStrike, he said they had no evidence that there was exfiltration from the servers. So there was no proof of any hack, let alone by Russia. That's what the head of CrowdStrike said. So, of course, there are those like the Veterans Intelligence Professionals for Sanity, who publish a Consortium News, who have argued even earlier that this was an internal leak, that it couldn't have been transferred overseas because of the speed rates, etc. My point before was it didn't matter to me who got the emails because they were true. So it could be Russia, it could be somebody else. So I'm not saying it was Russia. I'm not saying it was anybody else. I don't know. I'm saying it's irrelevant from the point of view of journalism, who the source was, if the documents are verified and accurate. We're not talking about oral statements in an interview with a source. We're talking about documents. So that's what the position is. Again, I don't think it's relevant, but Sean Henry said that there was no exfiltration, that they had evidence, even though they'd made statements all along and wound up in Mueller's indictments that the 12 GRU agents were responsible for that.
Yeah.
Now about Vault 7, I'm not sure what the question is.
I can mention Vault 7 if you want me to.
Well,
Yeah.
could I make a point here, please, Marjorie, even to break in? I think we should all recognize these issues have nothing to do with the case brought against Julian, literally nothing to do. We're talking about a hypothetical prosecution which has not been brought about events that took place after 2010. They have no bearing on the charges or the issues, the constitutional issues at all. So we could just as well argue, we could talk about Breitbart, we could talk about any journalist you want in some other case, but whatever Julian did after 2010, I don't know if any of these charges go to 2011, but has really no bearing on this case. Am I wrong?
I think that's correct. That's correct.
Okay. A technical question that 3 people have asked already. Satoko, can you say whether or not this can be seen, that this can be seen after today? And it's being, somebody has asked, it is being shown live now on Consortium News.
That's right. We picked up the live stream.
Yeah.
There was a problem with us on our end for some reason.
Can this be seen after we're through today somehow?
Yes.
In an hour, the entire program will be available to people who want to see it on Consortium News. Thanks for the question.
All right, great. Yukari has asked, and I think this could be for anyone, given as it has just been mentioned, Daniel, thank you for saying that this COVID has now come to the cell block where Assange is. Someone has asked, Yukari, can't there be some emergency measure taken available to the public or lawyers that to stop this horrendous treatment of him now? Isn't this an extra motivation that can be used somehow? Can Marjorie or anyone?
Well,
yeah, Marjorie.
Julian Assange's defense team has argued to Judge Barrister in the London court that he is at particular risk for the coronavirus because of his pulmonary weaknesses and pre-existing condition as a result of the lack of medical treatment, the medical treatment that was denied him when he was in the Ecuadorian embassy by the UK government. And there had been, I believe, even then, even a few months ago, cases of the coronavirus in Belmarsh prison, which is where Julian Assange is being held. And yet she denied that request by his lawyers. So he is in danger, he is in jeopardy of contracting the coronavirus. And if he does, it would be devastating to him.
And her ruling cannot be challenged at this point by a higher court?
I think they could have taken a writ to a higher court. I don't know if they did on that particular issue. We have the same situation in the United States where prisons are basically incubators for the COVID-19. And those challenges don't go anywhere. You know, people who are incarcerated have many fewer rights than people on the outside.
One more question to you, Marjorie, and the fact that there has been disallowed normal oral closing remarks, and apparently I don't know, but it sounds like the public will never know what the closing remarks are. Is this really legal? I mean, how can she get away with this?
Well, I don't know what her justification was. She might be talking about national security, and I think extensive, I think 200 or 300 pages of closing submissions by the defense, and the prosecution and I think that was November 10th, if I'm not mistaken, and then I think the prosecution has 2 weeks. That would be the 20th. Right. Okay. So it was the 16th plus 14 is what?
Right.
Yeah, I'm not a great mathematician.
But
At any rate, the prosecution will give its closing submissions. They are they're extensive. They're in writing, but for some reason they're not being released to the public.
Well, I mean, how can we be sure that she's going to read 200 pages?
You can never be sure that any judge is going to read anything.
Okay. Dennis asks, what is the government's legal rationale for indicting a non-U.S. citizen under this Espionage Act who allegedly committed crimes outside of the U.S. territory? I mean, he's never lived in the United States. I mean, how can this happen?
I think I answered that before by talking about that 1961 amendment. They have
Oh, yes. I'm
they
sorry.
have universal jurisdiction. They can pick up any journalist anywhere in the world if they feel, the U.S. government, that they broke U.S. law,
Right.
which technically he did if you look at that section of the Espionage Act, which is unconstitutional, most reasonable people would say. But they have a universal jurisdiction in the Espionage Act.
Right. Trump has, it's been said that Trump intervened here through another politician. And the question goes out, does this mean that the president could individually drop the charges? And if that's the case, could Biden drop the charges? And if that's the case, can we not put pressure? Can there not be put pressure by the public to do this?
This really goes to the whole issue of the independence of the Department of Justice, which is run by the Attorney General. And it is the Attorney General is not the president's personal lawyer. The Attorney General is the Attorney General of the United States. And but Trump has made it very clear that he considers the Attorney General to be his personal lawyer, and he fired Jeff Sessions for recusing himself from the Mueller investigation, and now has his lackey in place. But Biden has made it very clear, Joe Biden has made it very clear that he wants the Department of Justice to be independent. In fact, he has said when asked about whether or not he would pursue or stand in the way of the indictment of Donald Trump for the many crimes that he has clearly committed, he said that he is going to remain, he wants to look forward, not backward, which is exactly what Barack Obama said about prosecuting the torturers from the Bush administration was a big mistake. But Biden has said many times that he wants the Attorney General and the Department of Justice to be independent. That said, Barack Obama certainly had close communication with Eric Holder, his Attorney General, and so I think that Biden, if there is pressure put on Biden, and he's not going to do things without pressure. That's what I'm writing about as we speak. then perhaps he could be persuaded, and Barack Obama's example, following Barack Obama's example of not indicting Julian Assange because of the New York Times problem.
That's an interesting point, Marjorie. This came out in the hearing, the politicization of the Department of Justice. That became a point for the defense to try to show this is a political case. And we heard that Barr, the Attorney General, actually believes in this cockamamie unitary executive idea, and he believes, and he said in speeches this year, Barr, that the president should be the one to determine who's indicted or not, as if he were a king. So Barr is a big part of the problem too, not just Trump, as you pointed out. But that came out in the hearing. That's an interesting point you made, Marjorie, that Biden, if you wanted to go back to the rationale that the Obama administration had for not indicting, could use this, and that would be great. And Trump also could pardon Assange. Some people saying that he might pardon Assange and Snowden just out of thumbing his nose at the establishment.
Someone has asked that you said that Julian would be handed regarding the request by Sweden the second time to ask Assange to come to Sweden to be asked once again about this sexual claim. How did this come out that that this would be the case, that if he would be handed over to the CIA, rather to the US, if he did come to Sweden? How did this come to light?
Well, this is what his lawyers, and he said at the time that he went into the embassy, that he could not afford to go back to Sweden because he felt he would be onwardly extradited to the United States. And we now know that that's what the US wanted to happen. So that's what that was about. There was another point was the Stefania Morizzi, the Italian journalist, in her great work in getting FOIAs, was able to show the British Crown Prosecution Service put enormous pressure on the Swedish government not to interview Assange via video, which Sweden had apparently done in other cases with someone they needed to interview abroad. So the British government all along did not want Assange to go to Sweden, and they wanted him to leave the embassy and go to Sweden. And once he stepped out of the embassy, they could have arrested him for his bail skipping, and then they could have started. Then the U.S. could have unveiled the indictment if it was ready, and the Obama administration, it would not have happened. But the Swedish issue was dropped 4 times. We have to keep in mind 4 different times, I believe. 3 times. Okay, 3 times. That's enough. That case was dropped, and he didn't fear that case so much as being sent to the United States if he'd gone back to Sweden. Okay.
Regarding the Espionage Act, Marjorie, do you know if there's any treaties? I mean, the fact that the Espionage Act allows journalists to be picked up anywhere in the world. Are there any treaties, international treaties or treaties with the United States that prohibit such a thing?
Well, as I said, the extradition, if he is extradited to the United States, the extradition treaty between the United Kingdom and the United States is going to be determinative, and that extradition treaty prohibits the extradition of someone for a political offense. And exposing war crimes, which is what WikiLeaks and Julian Assange did in 2010, 2011, is a classic political offense. So just under that extradition treaty, that would prevent his extradition. And one of the grounds for extradition is espionage. He's not charged with espionage, but he's charged under the Espionage Act. So that's another ground to show that he is that the extradition is being requested for a political offense, and a reason that the judge should deny extradition. And if she grants extradition, then, as I said, there would be several levels of appeal, and eventually it would get to the European Court of Human Rights, and they would assess the legalities under this extradition treaty between the United States and the United Kingdom.
Okay. Satoko, you're saying that someone's raising their hand. I can't see that. If you can.
Well, there are 3 hands up right now from Gary Brumbach, David Vine, and Baptista.
Okay, let's hear from David. Just speak, David. I can't see your question, so can you let him speak, Satoko?
Yes.
Good.
Actually, that must have been an error. My hand wasn't up.
Oh, okay. Well,
Uh,
Gary has his hand up for a while.
okay, Harry.
I asked him to unmute. Yeah, okay.
Did you say Harry?
Well, I invited Gary to speak.
Oh, Gary. Okay.
Are you there, Gary?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can the panelists hear me?
Yes.
Well, the point I want to make, and I think maybe Daniel might have alluded to it, is that we are all Julian Assange. The only people in America who are free of this, who have what I call a high liberty quotient, are about 15,000, mostly men, who are members of the power elite of our hypocrisy. And they are ruling and ruining our nation and the world. They are killing the future. And if we don't stop them, they will kill the future. Now, I've got many ideas as to how to stop them. One is that the power elite in corporate America and government America depend on props from each other to support and expand their power. And one example is stay out of jail cards that government gives corporate America. Corporate America gives government campaign funds, financing funds. So they depend on each other. And I've identified about 25 of these props, and I've set up a U.S. Democracy Corps that if I could get it established and get about 15 million people and get it organized, we could knock down all of those props and we would no longer have the power elite. And this could be done peacefully and legally. And we could lead from there to a new People's America where power is more evenly distributed among the whole populace. And there would no longer be homelessness, no longer be tremendous income inequality gap, etc. That's the point I want to make. And I would encourage people to look at my book, The Achilles Heel of Public Enemy Number One. And public enemy number one are those power elite. Thank you.
Okay. Any comments to that? I think that's a good comment in of itself. We're running out of time now. I think it's a good idea to begin to close down, and I think we should see the slides, Satoko, of how to support Julian Assange. These are some ideas that we have. I would think that we could write letters to editors of support. We could ask the media to cover the hearings. For example, in Denmark, where I live, I've written to several media. None of the media in Denmark has even covered any of the extradition hearing. I'm sure that this is the case in many countries. And it's not just a problem with the UK and the United States. It's actually a worldwide problem. And there's 5 governments directly involved in this, Sweden and Ecuador and Australia, in addition to the UK and the United States. I think that we ought to put as much pressure on the new government as possible. They're not going to do anything for the people other than just get rid of Trump, and then we're going to have much of the same stuff anyway. But I think that it's very important for especially liberals and progressives who have seen Biden as the answer, that they put a lot of pressure on him to stop this tragedy. We could organize actions and happenings in many countries, especially those 5 I've just mentioned. And there's a way that you can donate to this effort, and it's a defense fund. In closing, I'd like to thank our guests and all the participants. We've had quite a few participants who've asked a lot of questions. Our coordinating committee, Randa Sharon, Satoko Noramatsu, and Peter Koznick, who are, along with David Vine and Harry Kaysen and others, are among those who initiated this coalition and formulated this comprehensive manifesto. I want also to thank John Rachel, who, along with Satoko, our webinar manager, has designed the flyer. Thanks also to Kathy Vogan, who helped with from Consortium News, and our other co-sponsors, Roots Action, World Beyond War, Covert Action Magazine, Project Censored, Media Freedom Foundation, National Lawyers Guild, and German Peace Council. El pueblo unido jamás será vencido. The people united shall never be defeated. Good night and good luck.